Hades gave me a better version of the Blades of Chaos, and they not only have the primordial flame inside them, but they also have all the powers of all the Olympians inside them. But I noticed they also looked like the Blades of Athena, and then I asked Hades, are these called Blades of Athena? And then Hades said no, they're called the Blades of Zeus. And then I said interesting, my future predictions were about 50% on that. And then Hades said, now for our part of the deal, please return my mutilated body to its former handsome glory. And then I said okay uncle, and then I asked, did you want all those powers and everything else we discussed? And then he said yes, and then I said I will have to touch your body for that. And then he said, well, you can touch my leg. And then I touched Hades on the leg, and I gave him all the powers of absolute devotion and attraction, and I even made him a lot more handsome than he was before, and I even gave him a bigger penis, and he now has all the powers of a sex god. And then I transformed Hades into a very handsome man, and now he is very happy. And I said our part of the deal is finished because I have given you all the powers you wanted and more. And Hades' wife Persephone is still alive because of me, and because of that he asked me to make him handsome again. But I also gave him all the powers of a true sex god, which means not only will Persephone love him, but she will adore him and love him constantly, and so will every other beautiful woman. And then Hades said, fascinating, you didn't just give me what we agreed on, you gave me more. And then I said, I believe everyone deserves a real chance at love, even you uncle. And then Hades said, I always knew there's a reason you're my favorite nephew. And then I asked, can you please send me back to Earth? And then he said, you will have to be judged first, but I'm sure you will be found worthy and wanting by the old kings. And then I said, but I thought you held all dominion over this place uncle, surely you are powerful enough to bypass all that considering you're the strongest Olympian. And then he said, oh nephew, you flatter me. But yes, I can send you back immediately, but first I want one more thing from you nephew. And then I asked, oh, and what's that uncle? And then Hades said, and then he said, I wish to be free of this place anytime I want. Is there any way you could do that for me? And then I said, I can give you the powers to magically clone yourself infinitely without any drawbacks, meaning that no matter how many times you clone yourself, all your magical clones will have all your full powers without any negative drawbacks or negative side effects. And then Hades said, wonderful, please give me that power now. And then I asked Hades, if I do this for you now, then can you please send me back to Earth uncle Hades? And then he said, yes, of course. And then I gave Hades the powers to permanently clone himself without any drawbacks. And then I said, I've given you the powers to permanently clone yourself without any negative drawbacks, could you please send me back to Earth now uncle Hades? And then Hades said, yes, and nephew, please try not to die again anytime soon. And then I said, yes sir, I will try not to die again. And then Hades sent me back to Earth, right where my wife and child are. And then when I got back home I made love to my wife, and like me, my daughter Calliope is also powerful, and I knew my wife would be safe with her because nothing could hurt my family so long as my daughter Calliope is alive. And since she's half mortal, god killing weapons don't work on her much, and I knew they would be alright when I got them both to safety back at our house in Sparta. And then right outside my house, my father Zeus sent me the Blade of Olympus to become the savior I was meant to be, and I took the Blade of Olympus from the ground and I began training with it, and I learned everything about how to use the Blade of Olympus and the Blades of Zeus. And after training for days and making my weapons more powerful than they already were, I had mastered the weapons I currently have. And then I said, I am ready to face my brother Deimos when the time comes. But I could sense that Deimos was trying to get Pandora's box, and Deimos had freed himself from Ares, and now he was on a mission to stop Ares like I would have been in the original storyline. But I decided to teleport in front of him and destroy the spear that Ares threw at Deimos, and this time Ares was very angry when he saw me alive again. And I looked behind me at my brother Deimos and I smiled warmly at him and I said, I will see you soon brother, and I teleported back home to my family. And then Deimos smiled and said, I knew I couldn't kill you brother. And then Zeus teleported in front of Deimos and he said, wait Deimos, don't open that box, I can help you. And then Deimos said, I don't need your help old man, and I know you're my father. And then Zeus said, I can give you the powers to kill Ares without Pandora's box.